Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Houston Open. Gonna break down Memorial Park Golf Course, get you guys ready for this part of the schedule. Finally leaving the Florida swing, which I gotta say is a little bit bittersweet as I love going to the events down here. But now we've got ourselves a little bit of a different test over there in Texas and a golf course that is going to get these players ready for Augusta. Some have comped it out there to Augusta National, and with the two top players in the world, Rory and Scotty, teeing it up, we're gonna have a pretty good field to work with as well. But here in this course breakdown, gonna make sure you're ready for all of your exposure this week with a full breakdown of the event and golf course, hole by hole breakdown of the shots required around Memorial Park, and then towards the end, our key stats and comp courses that I'm using to identify my top plays. So by the end, you'll be an expert on the venue this week and how you can go out there and get your research started. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in with first off some of the course details. Memorial Park is a pretty lengthy golf course, especially for a par 70, so nearly 7,500 yards, and you do have 5 par 3s in play, which really means that it's playing closer to 7,600 yards. Or these extra par 3s mean that it's effectively playing even longer with those approaches, and you're going to see a lot coming from 175 plus, so more on that later. But the POA Trivalous Overseed is also going to be the grass type of the week, so just like you had down there in the Florida swing, a lot of the same agronomy over here in Texas. You've got that ryegrass overseed over there for the rough, and it is going to be a lot shorter this year. That is maybe the one thing I really noticed when taking a look at this sheet, is that they got the rough at about 1.25 inches, which is why I think this is such a good comp course out there to Augusta, because there's essentially no rough around that track. The greens are large, but they have a lot of speed and undulation to them. That's also a reason why they compare this over there to the Masters, and you've only got water in play of 4 of the 18 holes, so that's where you start to see the difference out there from some of these Florida tracks. But in terms of the agronomy, a lot of the same things going on, and last year you may remember that they made a few of the holes a little bit harder. They did make 16 a little bit harder, also 17 is 30 yards longer and has a brand new green. Those changes, of course, going to be implemented here in 2025 as well, but nothing really else changing since last year's event. Going over to some of the stat averages over the last few years, you can get a really good taste for what this golf course is about. And though you have some large greens, even fairways that are pretty wide as well, when this plays firm and fast, it's harder to go out there and hit greens and fairways. In fact, when you compare it to your PGA Tour average, you can see your fairway and green rate are lower than what we're used to seeing. But based on some of the weather that we've already had in the area this week, it is going to be a little bit softer here in 2025. So maybe your fairway rate closer to that 60% like we normally see on tour. Your green rate also probably closer to that PGA Tour average. Scrambling about your tour average around this course, maybe just a hair harder over the last 3 years. And your 3-putt percentage also rate about your PGA Tour average. So you're not talking about an overly difficult golf course here, but your winning score usually stays in check as well. I think a lot of that because of the par 70 setup. Because of that, birdie rate at about 3 per round, which is lower than what we're used to seeing out here on tour. And your bogey average also a little bit higher than what you have out here on tour, which might be a little bit surprising, right? Looking at some of these other categories, right? Doesn't look like an overly difficult golf course, but partially it's the setup, right? Having 5 par 3s, right? Only the 3 par 5s to go after limits your opportunities to go out there and make birdies. Last year you had Steven Yeager win, some power players up there towards the top, right? Like a Dietrich, Finau, Moore, and Scheffler are all players that can hit it a long way. Throw in Toasty as well there with the T2. But the year before that, you had guys like Finau win, Alexander, a much shorter player, same thing with a Ben Taylor, but then you also had some bombers up towards the top as well. So I don't think this is a golf course where you have to hit the ball a long way. It has proven helpful over the last few seasons or so, but it's more so about your second shot it in, right? This is a second shot golf course. Short game comes in handy around here as well. It's not the kind of track where you have to do one thing particularly well. Like if you're a short game specialist and you have a decent week out there with the ball striking, like you see those guys showing up on this leaderboard. Like to give you an example there, like Martin Trainer showing up. Like you don't see him showing up very often out here on tour. Kramer Hickok was towards the top out there in 2021, right? He's not an overly imposing ball striker off the tee. Heck, even back there in 2022 when you had a Norn finishing top 5, right? He's not one of those elite tier ball strikers, but you do have some elite tier ball strikers towards the top end of the board as well. Like a Finau, of course, who went out there and won in 2022. Guys like an Alex Smalley, an absolute striper. Same thing with an Aaron Rai. So I think it's a very fair golf course. You're going to see a variety of different styles have success around here, which makes our job maybe a little bit harder from the modeling standpoint, right? Not really like 1 or 2 key stats that we're really honing in on, but it does open up your your options a lot from the betting board. In terms of some of the analytics for this track, you can see you've got 12 of the driver holes, so that's 12 of the 13 possible holes that you're probably going to be hitting driver on, mostly because the rough isn't penal whatsoever, but also because it's a lengthy golf course. You can see with the approach distribution that it skews maybe just a little bit longer than what we're used to seeing, a lot from 125 to 175, and like I previously mentioned, that 175 to 225 range is utilized a lot more than what we're used to seeing. Your putting rates, your around the green rates are pretty close to your PGA Tour average, so not really that much I want to say about those categories. But now that we've gotten a good taste for what this course is all about, let's go to the hole by hole breakdown and show you the shots required around this track. First up, we've got a hole that is changed to a par 4, so it's going to play probably 40 yards shorter than what you have here on paper, so obviously going to be one of the harder holes because it is a converted par 5, but one of the maybe more difficult tests that you have around here, but luckily not a green with a whole bunch around it when it comes to hazards. Hole number 2 is 162, so one of the shorter par 3s that you're going to have around here, and front pin location is real simple to this sort of hole, but a back right can be especially tricky. Hole 3 is 588, so this will be a par 5. This will not be changed, of course, as it is nearly 600 yards. Hard to reach into unless you're a bomber and have a favorable wind direction, but still a birdie look for a lot of these different players. Hole 4 is 487, so this is one of the harder holes that you have out there. It is a driver, then a mid-iron in for a lot of players, and luckily, and this is the beauty of this golf course, there's not a whole bunch of bunkers around the greens around here. It's a lot of fairway area that you have to get up and down around, which is why guys like Scotty Scheffler that excel off of those tight lies tend to have a lot of success around this track. Hole 5 is 392, so a shorter par 4 compared to a lot of the first holes to start here, right? It's one of the better birdie looks on top of that par 5. Next up, you have hole 6, which is 442, mid-length par 4, but when it plays firm and fast out here, like hitting 320-yard drives is not a hard thing to do. Like even your shorter players that can get the ball in the short stuff are going to get 20, 30 yards of run out, and this year, because it's going to maybe be a little bit softer, it could actually play harder out here on some of these holes, because your drives are going to pretty much hit and then land and stick. Next up, we have hole 7, which is 215. This is a longer par 3, a lot harder than the first one that you had on the scorecard. Hole 8 is 610, so another one of these longer par 5s. I think this is really where a lot of the length comes in because, you know, those medium to even like the 470, 480 yard par 4s, those aren't that hard to reach into, but if it does play softer this year, like a 600 yard par 5, especially if it's into the wind or something like that, could gobble up a lot of these players. So, you know, depending on the forecast this year, it does look like distance might be a bigger factor. Hole 9 is your third par 3. This one is 200 yards. It does have water in front of it. To front locations, it can become a factor, but anything in the back, and you'd really have to mishit it to get it in there. Hole 10 is 454, so this is a medium length par 4. It is a driver, maybe a 3-wood for players because it really tightens up in the driver zone, but still a pitch and putt par 4 for a lot of these players. Hole 11 is 241, so one of the harder holes out here. It is shortened for a lot of the different rounds out here, I will say, so it doesn't always play 240 yards. Hole 12 is 502 yards. This is one of the harder holes out here as well, and you know, if it's going to play soft out here this year, the more and more I look at this course, the more and more I think that the distance is going to matter. Next up, we have hole 13, which is 403 yards. Pretty straightforward par 4. One of the easier holes that you have out here, especially when it's playing downwind. Hole 14 is 533, and this one is a converted par 4. So, you know, it would be a real reachable, real easy par 5 if they didn't change it. But because they have to make it a par 70 from a par 72, this is one of the holes that gets exponentially more difficult. Hole 15 is 153 yards. This is the shortest par 3 that you have here. Water in play again, but it has to be a front pin to really be a factor. Hole 16 is 575, so this is a par 5. Has water in play the entire way down the right, so it's maybe not as straightforward as some of the other par 5s on site. Hole 17 is 411. This is a pitch and putt par 4. This finishing stretch does have a lot of water in play though, so that's part of the reason why it's a little bit harder. And this is the hole that was taken from right about here for the green and pushed about 30 yards further back. Next up, you have 17, which is 495. Difficult finishing hole here, nearly 500 yards, and one of the few greens around here that has some of those greenside bunkers. We've got the bet the number model up now, and now let's talk about our key stats for this week. So first thing that BTN was looking at in their modeling is regular old shots gained off the tee, which you can imagine is a factor at a 7,500 yard par 70, but especially if it's it's going to play softer this year. So I think having that distance and that accuracy is going to be an advantage. And personally, in my modeling, I'm going to put some extra emphasis on that ball speed, because I think that with that 1-inch rough, kind of like what you have at the Masters, you can pretty much bomb and gouge this place. I mean, there's only 4 holes with water in play, and I believe 3 of those are par 3s. A couple of the finishing holes, right, you have water down the right side with the drives. But these kind of guys towards the top that are both accurate and long, right, they're always going to grade out very well. But I think once they add a little bit of that club head speed or maybe ball speed on top of that, these bombers are going to show up even more out there in my modeling. So you can see some of your top players towards the top end of the list there. You got Kevin Yu, Taylor Moore also really hitting the driver well lately. Guys like Potgieter, Smalley, you'd expect to see towards the top end of that list. And same thing with Nicholas Norgard Muller, who's one of the longest players that we have in this field. Next up, we got ourselves shots gained approach, which is every single week going to be a part of this modeling. And to take a look at the last 24 rounds, last 40 rounds, whatever you want your sample size to be, you need guys that are hitting their irons well. Now, guys like Norlander, he's been a little bit sketchier off the tee lately, but still going to get a sizable bump out there in the modeling. And if you can find somebody that's popping over here in this category, but also striping that driver, then they're going to get a massive bump over there. You can see, in fact, guys like Scotty Kirk Kitayama that do that same thing there, right? Number 1 for Scotty in the model, not a surprise there, but look at that. Kurt Kitayama, despite a missed cut last week, in fact, he's gone missed cut, T33, then missed cut, he is still number 6 over there in the bet the number model. So that is how much that ball striking is being incorporated. You can see a few other players that are grading out well with the irons, and like I said, where you really want to look for is that crossover between the off the tee. Guys like Joel Damon doing solid in both categories. Same thing with a Michael Kim there, Charlie Hoffman, Aaron Rai, Max McGreevy, and Doug Yim. Also players that look rather impressive. In terms of your proximity buckets, it does look like BTN's really looking at 150 to 200. Now, guys like Kyle Westmoreland playing a lot over there on the Corn Ferry, not a massive sample size against these PGA Tour level fields, but Matteo Manacero, guys like Buckley have been playing on the PGA Tour. Echeverria, of course, playing all of his golf up there on the top circuit. All players that you might want to look at a little bit more this weekend. There's Norlander again. I guess that's why he's the whole way up at number 14 in the bet the number model this week. But all of these sort of players gonna get a small little bump out there in my model as well. They're looking at some chipping off the fairway, which I showed you guys before, right? There's not a lot of bunkers around these greens. Also not a whole lot of rough as well. And even if there is rough, it's only like an inch long. So it's not quite a fairway cut, but it's not all that penal whatsoever. So looking at guys that can get the job done off of those tight lies are players that you might want to consider. So Sun GM towards the top end of that list. Like you'd expect to see Scotty Scheffler up there as well. And you can see that, right? Gaining 0.3 shots per round off this fairway. But other players that grade out well are these guys in the dark green. And we saw Alex Smalley, right, really hitting his driver well before. Andrew Novak's driving the ball well as well. But look at that. Danny Walker, maybe a potential sleeper play to look after. And Kevin Roy as well, right? He's gaining in those 2 ball striking categories and then also off of that fairway cut. We're also looking at some shots gained on this overseed. So it's that same Poa Trivalis overseed that we've had for the last month, maybe month and a half out there in the PGA Tour. So looking at players that have had hot form lately on this surface can for sure be useful, especially now that we have a pretty sizable sample. You know, if we were just like a week into the year, right, recent form on the surface might not mean all that much. But now that we're towards the end of the swing where you see this towards type of grass, you know, it's going to be a little bit more valuable than towards the beginning. So you can see some of your top performers in that category. Sam Ryder, Taylor Pendrith really getting the rock to roll out here on this surface. And if you can combine this out there with some ball striking like you have with the Taylor Pendrith, then that's why he's number 2 out there in the bet the number model. So, you know, a few other players that kind of stand out would be a Bridgman. We know he's really been putting well during this Florida swing. Jason Day, his ball striking maybe not amazing, but he's really been getting that, you know, putter going lately. Rory McIlroy, maybe that's why he's had so much success on these sort of golf courses. That's why you can see those guys in the top 5 of the model. And you can see over here, they also have ball speed on here. I actually didn't see that. I didn't realize they already had ball speed incorporated on here, but I'm going to pump this category up because with how wide some of these fairways are, because of the lack of hazards out there, guys like Potgieter can hit driver on almost every single hole. And with 500-yard par 4s, he can hit the ball 350, you know, if it's not going to be as soft as what they're calling for, maybe 370 to 400-yard drives on those sort of holes, especially if he catches one downwind. And he might have wedges into some of those extremely difficult par fours. So guys like Minwoo, you can tell he's really been working on his ball speed lately. Nicholas Norgard Muller, Rasmus Højgaard, one of the longest players that we have in the world, are all players that I'm going to give an even bigger bump to than what these bet the number guys are, because I think with some of that weather, with the fact that it might be softer this year, I think this off the tee distance is going to be an even bigger asset to go out there and have in 2025. So when you put it all together, you can see who bet the number grades out the best. I obviously make some adjustments out there to my own personal model, but the bet the number guys are always something I like to look at myself. You got Scotty Scheffler at number 1, Taylor Pendrith down there at number 2, Walker playing some solid golf at number 3. That's probably a little bit of a small sample size thing though, so take that one with a grain of salt. Guys like McIlroy, Woodland, Kitayama, Spawn all grading out very well. I like seeing Nicolai Højgaard up there after a couple missed cuts. I know it's been a little bit of a down stretch, but he still grades out really well with the analytics. Ryan Gerard's been playing well in the Florida swing. And look at that, Davis Thompson, maybe not doing anything flashy, but T13 at a signature event, top 10 over there at the Players, playing some sneaky good golf. So make sure to check out the modeling over here on Bet the Number if you guys haven't already. Of course, the sponsor of these videos, and you can do your own modeling. So not only do you have the Bet the Number stuff that you can look at, but you can make your own adjustments like I do over there on my stuff and get exactly what you're looking for with your player pool. And now for a couple quick comp courses that should play pretty similar to what we're going to get at this course that you might want to use for a little bit of leaderboard crossover. So first one is going to be the Masters and Augusta National, which we've already mentioned a few times to this point, but they have a very similar look off the tee, not all that much penalty, right, for missing unless you hit it in the water. And then also from the around the green perspective, a lot of those tight lie shots. So, you had Scotty go out there and win. That's why there's a lot of crossover here to the Houston Open. And I know it's a stronger field event, so you're really only going to get your elite tier players showing up on this board, but all for those players, which there's a pretty decent field out here in the Houston Open this year, you can find some of that crossover. So even for some of your like middle to lower tier guys like Højgaard, right, he's played well at the Masters before, maybe a look at this sort of golf course. And you have your Adam Shanks that got into your majors, that sort of thing, that also showed up at the top 20 last year. And if you go to the year before that, your Henleys and sure, a lot of live guys up there towards the top end of that board, but you've got a few guys that sneak into this field this year. So you can take a look at the Masters. Also, the US Open from Pinehurst. This is only a 1-year sample size, but Pinehurst statistically a very almost spawn line exact copy of what you're going to get for this golf tournament, right? All of those shaved off areas around the green, a long course that demands really good driving, also long iron play, and it's a long par 70, just like you have here. In fact, from the distance perspective, it's almost spawn line with what you have for this event. So, obviously a lot of live guys towards the top there, but look at that. Rory won, or nearly won over there at Pinehurst, right? So could potentially win this week. Would not surprise me at all if he got his 3rd win over here at this sort of golf tournament. But look at that, Tony Finau, right? We know that he's had a ton of success around here, whether it's a win, another top 5 finish that he has on his record around this golf course. Hideki, Pavon, by the way, Pavon also showed up at the Masters, had a decent finish there. All guys to maybe take a look, an extra look at or two over there this weekend. You've got your Aaron Rise down here. Rise had a pretty decent record around this golf course as well. And look at that, Davis Thompson up there as well, right? He top 10 to over there at the US Open this year. Another player that you might want to take an extra look at. And then finally, we've got the Sanderson Farms, the Country Club of Jackson, which is a par 72. It is a lot easier of a golf course than what you're going to have this week. But the approach profile, a lot of those mid to long irons, also a golf course off the tee that doesn't have a lot of penalty, is why I like to take a look at this for comparison. So you can see Kevin Yu won there. This is also a weaker field event, being a fall series event, that you get a similar field strength to some of your mid to lower tier players. So, Augusta can help us out with some studs. Same thing with US Open, right? It's one of the stronger fields that you have in the entire year. But over here at the Sanderson Farms, right, it gives us a chance to look at some of those mid to lower tier players. And maybe it's not as good of a comp as some of these top 2, but it's decent enough to go out there and look at. So you can take a look at this year, you can take a look at the year prior, all of that sort of stuff over there from the Sanderson Farms. But last 4 or 5 year sample size, right, we have a massive sample over here at the Sanderson Farms, and like I said, comparable field strength as well. So that's why it's maybe the most useful of all these different comp courses, even if it's maybe not the most similar course out of the 3. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Go ahead, smash that like button if you haven't already, and also subscribe so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll of course include our DFS and betting preview, which will be dropping a little bit later on this evening, as well as our Wednesday live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern time, going through all of your questions, weather, ownership, all of that before lock, and all the content out there for rounds 2 through 4. That'll include Showdown over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. I do their Showdown shows over there for Thursday through Saturday, as well as for the prop and betting live streams, which we do over here on this channel out there for rounds 2 through 4. So make sure to stop on by for all of that throughout the weekend. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. And on top of hitting the like button and subscribing, if you go ahead and comment down below what you've got as the winning score this week, if you end up getting that correct, you will win a free month access to my Patreon page. On there is where I post all my projections, modeling, all the different bets that I'm placing for any given event, whether it's for outrights, top 10s, or 20s. I post those over there on the DFS tier. I've got all my DFS projections posted on the DFS tier itself. So that's for Draftkings. You got ownership, my player pool over there for that side. And then also all the prop stuff and underdog and prize picks that I do. So a lot of extra content that I'm doing out there for every single round. Rounds 2 through 4 for Showdown, rounds 1 through 4 over there for the prop side as well. And like I said, for a chance to earn a free month of that Patreon page, just give me the winning score for this week. It'll be on a first come, first serve basis. So once the score is taken once, it cannot be taken again. So go ahead, claim your score down below before anyone else does. And like I said, you can get a free month access over there to that Patreon page, which, you know, obviously winning that would be great to go out there and get that access. But if you want access now, a link in the description to go out there and join it as well. It helps support the channel, helps do everything that we're doing here for free on the YouTube channel, and it gives you every single piece of analysis that I'm doing, right? Whether it's the modeling for every single main slate, the showdown projections, all that extra stuff that I do for every single player that's teeing it up. So that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support in the channel as per usual. Best of luck with everything that you're doing, as I said before. I'll see you guys for that DFS and betting preview a little bit later on this evening.